LA fires highlight a big gap in California's state emergency response. My guest today is Jay Coggan, who's the former commanding general for California State Guard. Today he's here to tell us what is the difference between National Guard and State Guard, and how the State Guard could have been deployed to help with Los Angeles fires, and they could have gotten there much faster, helping with the fires and commanding with the traffic and security. I'm Siam Korami. Welcome to California Insider. We apologize for the quality of the audio in this recording. There are parts that may be choppy or hard to hear. Jay, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Appreciate it.
You know, Jay, we have had the fires that have been devastating in LA, and we have had to tap into the National Guard. Can you tell us what's the process to tap into the National Guard? Because it took them some time to get involved, right?
Well, the basic premise is if the National Guard is needed, whatever agency needs them, whether it's LA, the county, the city, makes a request to the California Office of Emergency Services, the governor's office approves it, and then orders go down to the military department saying they need whatever assets they want, whether it's personnel, helicopters, planes, whatever it might be. And then it's the military department's job to effectuate that. The military department of California is a state agency, and it is responsible for running and managing both the National Guard and the State Guard. So the first request goes to OES, Office of Emergency Services. They then, if approved, will issue orders and requests to the National Guard, to the military department, whose job it is to respond. They do not say, I want National Guard, I want State Guard. They simply say to the military department, I need assets, personnel, and equipment. That's all that happens.
And does it take a long time for them to get involved in an emergency like this when we have fires?
Well, it depends what the emergency might be. Certainly for fire, absolutely. Say the National Guard is trained for its federal mission, warfighting. Many people don't realize that approximately 40% of all soldiers deployed to the Middle East during the wars we've recently had were all National Guard. There just aren't enough active duty soldiers. So the way that is managed is federal funding is utilized to train the National Guard. They are in state command and control, unless federalized, but they're trained with federal money for the warfighting mission. They are not paid to train for a state mission. As a result of that, you have all these personnel, but you have infantry brigade, you have artillery units, you have all sorts of units that would not really be used during a disaster in California or anywhere. So what happens is if it's a specialized issue such as firefighting, you have lots of human beings and warm bodies, but they're untrained. They simply do not train during the year to respond to a fire. So the result is, let's say there's been a request and an approval for the National Guard to send in personnel for wildland firefighting. Problem is, where do you get them from? You get them from various units within the National Guard, but they don't know how to put a fire out. And the last thing you want to do are send personnel into a dangerous zone that haven't been trained to do the job. It's a risk of itself. So they're generally sent to Camp Roberts. The entire process is about 5 days of both transit and training by CAL FIRE on how to do wildland firefighting. So if you think about it, from the day the governor approves, OES issues orders, and the department says, I'll get you people, you're really looking at least 5 days before they're boots on the ground. And during those 5 days, you could lose a lot of property. You lose lives. They're just not there. They're coming, but they're not readily trained and ready to do the mission. Same thing like we've had in LA during this fire, the need for personnel to do traffic control points to ensure that there's also not looting in the areas, all the problems that have happened. And of course, the police are just stretched to the nth degree. I mean, LA is a large area. They've got regular crime to police. So you can't just take every police officer and send to the fire zone, and it would be total havoc. So what's happened is they've actually mobilized, in this particular fire, the infantry battalion or brigade. Problem is, they're not trained for this. They're trained for warfighting. So the net result is you've taken people from the National Guard MP brigade off mission to train the infantry brigade in the middle of mission to do this kind of security work during the fire. So I guess it's kind of begs the question, when you have all these people on your land, why is it you don't train them until after they're needed? They should be trained before they're needed so they're ready to be utilized when they're requested. I hope that answers your question.
Now, are you saying that it took 5 days for us to tap into the National Guard during this fire?
Not necessarily. What I'm saying is it took 5 days from the decision to provide service members for the firefighting for them to be trained and back down to LA to be able to respond to the fire. That's it. And from the security perspective, it's whatever time it took them to bring them up from their units and get them trained on how to do the security work they've been asked to do. I don't know whether that's 5 days or not, but it's certainly not in ready time before the event.
So it's at least a few days or some time of training because people need to get trained how to fight fires.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't want to send untrained people. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the pictures of what it looks like. You do not want to send people that have not had at least basic training and assurances they're capable of doing the work out onto a fire line. That would be dangerous to them, dangerous to the entire command structure and everybody else working around them.
Now, is this normal to call the National Guard, or is there another force that we could have that deal with this kind of emergencies?
It could be the State Guard. I mean, the word National Guard is a national organization. It's got a national mission. State Guard is really a state mission. The California State Guard has existed certainly before World War II, but during World War II, there were 73,000 men and women in California that were part of it because the National Guard went to war. Somebody had to take care of California while they were gone. Say during Korea. Big difference during Vietnam because the National Guard did not go and they're on. But we have had a State Guard in California, but it had sort of waned in utilization and it become solely, I like to call it the reserve of the reserve. All it did was support the National Guard, an important mission, don't misunderstand you. The State Guard currently trains the National Guard in small arms training, how to shoot, to improve their shooting capabilities when they go to war. They train them in truck driving. Their lawyers do all the wills, powers of attorneys for the National Guard before they deploy. They do a lot of the logistics, office work, backup. But as an operational force, it had basically gone away. And I said, why are we being utilized? Because many members of the State Guard are currently serving law enforcement officers. Police, some police chiefs, many retired law enforcement, retired police chiefs. And so why don't we do that? And then very shortly thereafter, we had another fire, and the question was asked of me or of someone else, why do every summer or every fire season do we have to reinvent the wheel? We know there's going to be fires. Why do we have to spend 5 days every time there's a fire training the people to do the job when they could be pre-trained? Now, the reality is the State Guard does not have a federal mission. So it doesn't have to drill or train to go to war. Its job is solely to protect California's people. It's effectively the governor's army. The governor mandates and controls and is the commander-in-chief of the California State Guard, not the president. And these people are volunteers. They train for free. There's a group of people, many of them are young, who don't want to join the National Guard and deploy or the regular army and deploy, but they want to serve. They want to be in uniform. They want that camaraderie that comes from working with other members in the military, because the State Guard is military by law. We have those that have retired from the National Guard or the Army or the Marines or the Navy, all of them, but miss serving, miss being back in uniform, and so they joined the State Guard. We have those that are a little older, maybe 50s, 60s even, that did not join years ago as they raised families and didn't want to deploy. But now their kids are grown and they want to serve again. So we have a lot of very talented people that want to do this and don't need to get paid. Now, they are paid when they're called up to actually fight the fire, just like everybody else is. Effectively, it doesn't even cost California money on this because the federal government is reimbursing California 100%. But the point is where else are you going to get a fully trained force every month? All they do is practice putting out fires, craft is doing security work, craft is doing flood response, search and rescue. Whatever the disaster might be in California, that's what they train for, and it costs the state effectively nothing. I often like to thank California, unfortunately, from a disaster perspective, for seasons. The first season is rain. What happens after rain? A lot of growth, which everybody is now blaming on why the fires are so bad, because following rain, too often we have drought. When we have drought, all that new growth just sits there as tinder. Then that's drought season. That's our second season. Then we go into fire season. Why? Because we have all the tinder. The Sea Annis comes in. Something sparks it. There's an arsonist. Who knows what? It burns. What happens then for the fourth season, in my opinion, is let's assume the winter after a fire disaster like this, we have massive rains. We no longer have ground cover. All the hills take a mudslide. That's why Malibu Run goes into the ocean. Why roads get closed off all the time. Why there needs to be rescue. So the seasons, to me, are really disaster related, and how do you respond? The State Guard's purpose was to be prepared to do all of that.
And right now, that's not happening, right?
No, it's not. When I first decided to do this, we started going on social media to recruit young men and women to be firefighters. We needed them a little more healthy because, last thing you want is someone passing out from smoke inhalation on the fire line or having a heart attack or someone with asthma. Unfortunately, this is a very dangerous job. These firefighters are unique human beings. And we recruited within a very short time, 125 immediately. They were vetted medically by medical personnel, and they were trained. And then the California Office of Emergency Services gave us 5 wildland firefighting engines, capable of bringing personnel into a fire line, having water, tools, all the necessary stuff. They then trained up on those, how to operate them. And they did go out to fires. 2 years ago, there was a change in leadership at the military department. Let's just say that the new leadership, he did not want the State Guard. He did everything possible to pretty much ignore them and take them down. And the firefighting unit was disbanded. Some of the people got jobs in what's called Task Force Rattlesnake, which is fire abatement. But all the other people that trained went nowhere. The security forces were merged into somebody else. They weren't doing anything. Swiftwater Rescue disappeared. And he literally gave back the 5 fire engines to OES. I can only imagine how valuable they would have been right now in those very, very narrow and winding roads in the Hollywood Hills. These are smaller trucks. I think I may have sent you some pictures. If not, I will. They would have fit on these roads really well. With some water, could have pulled a water buffalo behind them. They could have actually physically carried firefighting personnel up these roads and made it a lot easier to get them there than a big pumper truck, and they had to push cars out of the way and save property and people. They're all gone. That's a policy decision which I cannot understand. Why would you take down a ready force and not replace it with anything? If that had happened, you wouldn't have needed 5 to 8 days of training. They would have trained all year long, and on request would have been available. That's really a shame, quite frankly, and dangerous. Dangerous in people of California.
Now, Jay, do you recommend to bring this force back?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there's no reason not to have it. More states are activating their state defense forces to respond to these disasters, like the California State Guard. They're growing. We're retrenching. California has sent their people, Texas has sent their people to work on the border. There are people, Florida just stood it up, spent $100 million organizing their State Guard. We got no money. In fact, our people were trained with private firms.
So it doesn't cost the state anything to have this force?
No, it really doesn't. When they're utilized to fight a fire, there's a cost. But that's a cost you'd pay anybody anyway. National Guard, private people, it's irrelevant. But they train for free. That's the key. Where else are you going to get a ready, willing, and fully trained, vetted operational force that are going to do all that work for you for nothing more than make sure they have their equipment and a sandwich for lunch? That's about it. And a bus ride to where they train. That's the effect of it. And when we didn't have money from the state, we started a foundation. It was very bicameral. We had the elected district attorney of San Luis Obispo County, the chairman of the board of supervisors, San Bernardino County, people who needed this kind of resource. We had the vice president of UPS, of Government Affairs. We had a vice president of MGM Television, the former treasurer of California, John Chong. And we raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, bought boats, bought masks for firefighting, bought shovels, bought radio equipment, bought everything so these people could train. And then, again, as a matter of policy, the new leadership in the department decided we don't want people to protect California. We'd rather just ignore them because we don't like them. And it really came down to we don't like them. And as a result of that, we actually disbanded the foundation with hundreds of thousands of dollars left that we were going to use to further train new people.
Now, how many people were in this State Guard force that you guys had?
When I was the commander, it was about 1,600 people total, doing various jobs throughout the force. But remember, this is a non-supported force. We built it up pretty much from whole cloth, for want of a better phrase. If the state ever got behind this, which they should, I mean, we were doing our own social media. If the state got behind this and provided the resources for recruiting, for marketing, and for training, I mean, not the dollars for the personnel, but the equipment and the resources to feed them and transport them, I could get you a couple thousand people in a heartbeat, ready, stationed throughout California, ready to respond to whether it's fire, flooding, search and rescue, any kind of disaster, period. It would take, months to do it, but it could be done. Readily available and trained personnel, all qualified and certified. Nobody goes out on the line, whether it's security armed up or whether it's firefighting, without being qualified and certified to do the job they're doing. We don't just want warm bodies.
Now, does this force include other resources like doctors and potential?
Oh, sure. I was a lawyer in civilian life. I'm a Vietnam veteran, but I then became a lawyer and practiced law in Century City for many, many years, and then decided to join the State Guard because as a lawyer, I wanted to provide services and help for service members. And we did. We helped so many service members that had deployed. In fact, the California State Guard, because they work for the governor and they're not federal, were accordingly authorized to go to court in uniform to represent soldiers coming back from the war zone that were being foreclosed on, repossessed, being fired for all the wrong reasons. And we started going to court for free for the soldier. And the net result is nobody lost their homes. Nobody got repossessed. Everybody got the help they needed at no cost whatsoever because these lawyers wanted to volunteer. Right now, these lawyers would be available to be in LA County working at resource centers, helping people understand how to fill forms out, how to get help, how to get aid. Doctors, a lot of doctors. These are people that want to serve, but earlier in their careers didn't want to join active military for, personal reasons. They wanted to raise their families, whatever. They've joined. In fact, one of my doctors who was at Stanford at the time, at the request of the CDC, we sent him to Washington, D.C., and for 1 year, wearing a uniform every day, wearing California on his uniform, he ran $1 billion program for the federal government during COVID. Yet nobody knows about that because the same individual that doesn't like us never even told the governor. I'm sure the governor had known it. He would have broadcast it all over the place. In fact, the California Military Department won the annual LAMP Award issued by the American Bar Association for legal assistance for the Army to the California Military Department. That means not the regular Army, not the Reserve Army, not any National Guard in the country, but the California Military Department got it for legal assistance because of the programs we developed. That's very proudful for California. I don't think the governor knows it. I'm being honest with you. I don't think he was ever told. Why wouldn't you brag about that? But the whole country, all the regular Army, all the Reserve Army, all the National Guards, California's military department got the American Bar Association Award for legal assistance because of what the State Guard was doing. These are examples. You have doctors, lawyers. If you name it, we got it. We have people that teach truck driving. We have people that teach small arms shooting. If you need it, we got it. And by the way, my whole attitude is we don't have it, we can recruit to it. Because think about it, whatever skill set is in California, I guarantee you there are people that do it, would love to put that uniform on, be very prideful, standing with the National Guard because they're co-equal. The National Guard and State Guard, when in command and control of the governor, there's no difference. California, a State Guard officer can command National Guard and vice versa. We stand co-equal because there's no federal nexus for us at that point. So they want to assure it. You name a skill set that California needs, I'll find you people through recruiting. They'll just jump at the chance to volunteer to do this. You got 40 million people. We can't find a few thousand that want to help in a uniform? Give me a break. Easy.
And what would be the impact of having this force ready?
The impact would be that California, because we're going to get a lot more disasters. We know that. It's not going away. And anybody that thinks it is delusional. The truth is, it would mean that you had, I like to call them like a hot shot, but they're not in the same term, but they're ready to go. No matter what the problem or disaster California has, you've got people ready to go out the door immediately. Where else? And also think about it during seriously tough crises like this going on in LA right now. Our normal first responders are exhausted. They're exhausted. Our guys to relieve them on a midnight shift, a day shift, whatever it might be. The result would be is you'd have a lot of better morale even amongst the existing first responders, more arrested first responders, because we could act, even if we weren't out the door first, we'd be a great relief valve for all of them, and they need it. Trust me, they're working their butts off, to say the least. These are amazing first responders. The fire and police and medical people that are out there. I tip my hat if I have one on.
Now, Jay, you really have this belief in the State Guard.
Yes.
What did you see on the ground that makes you have this certainty about this community of people that are volunteering?
Every time we sent them out, whether it was fires or securities, without any embarrassment, any negativity. I remember the first weekend, a very strange story, but the first Saturday I put our very first fire team out. They weren't as a team, they were mixed in 5 people each in each force package. Force package is 20 people. So we were mixed in with National Guard, and about 3-4 hours after they went out on the first fire, I got a call from another general who said, "I'm sorry to tell you, sir, but one of your soldiers had a stroke." I felt terrible for the soldier, but then I hung up. I'm saying to myself, how do I message this now? I've spent so much time saying we're capable of doing this. This is bad. Except he called me an hour later and said, "I apologize, sir. It wasn't one of your soldiers. It was a 25-year-old National Guardsman who had a stroke, and your guy saved his life." So the bottom line is the State Guard has produced, if they've never failed and always produce. We were doing joint exercises with the Coast Guard for tsunami response and flooding. State Guard, not National Guard. I have films of joint exercises off Morro Bay. We would go out with the big boats, the small boats running on flotilla, presuming that there was a problem on shore. We were sending our small boats in to rescue the people, get them into the small boats, bring them out to the bigger boats where the doctors were, and manage it as if it was an instant response. The Coast Guard thought we were amazing. They kept doing it with us. And in fact, during Fleet Week, the last 2 years in San Francisco, we got specific requests for our people to run picket fences, to run security for the Navy fleet and the overflight of the Blue Angels in the bay. Obviously, we're doing something right if people want us. And during COVID, we were running the food banks. And we had 400 or 500 people with the State Guard running food banks throughout the state during COVID. And they wanted us, not even the National Guard. And I'll tell you one reason why. Not everyone in the National Guard wants to do this. That's not what they thought they were going to do. A lot of them are burned out because they're training, they're going to war, they're doing all the other things. When someone joins the State Guard, they join to do this. They want to get called up. They want to go fight the fire. They want to respond to a disaster. They're not joining up to get the federal retirement, to be part of the National Guard, to whatever else that might get the skills they will learn there. They're joining to volunteer to respond. Their desires are legion. You can't pay for that desire. That's why you have to volunteer. I think they're way better than anybody getting $1 for it. That's my opinion.
Now, Jay, you have a long career of service yourself.
Yes.
How did you get into it and why?
From the very beginning, I was the lousy student at the University of Connecticut. In the class, I started in 1966. I'm an old guy. And after 1 year, I dropped out and joined the service. The Vietnam War was on. I was 1A. I was gone. And I ended up becoming a combat air crewman on what's known as was the PTV Neptune. We were flying out of Naval Air Facility Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam, in Vietnam. We were doing low-level reconnaissance, looking for weapons coming in from the north. I got out of left the military in 71, finished college now in Connecticut, then came back to LA to go to law school, and started practicing law in 79. And then later I said, I still want to help. I'm too old now to go back into the active component. I'll join the State Guard. And that became my calling.
Hopefully this force will come back and will help us in the time of disasters in California. Major General Jay Coggan, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you so much, and good luck. And if anything, I believe in your operation there, and I believe it will be viewed by the appropriate people that might simply ask the question of the legislature, the governor, what a great idea. Want to start looking into this? Get it organized because it's coming back again. So I'm hoping this gets that result. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Have a great one.